All right, welcome back, class. This is College of Mid-America World History 1, session number 2, studying the Greek civilization. I hope all of you are doing well and you're able to keep up on the reading. And also, don't forget, end of this week, your paper is due. Your first 5-page paper is due to me. You have to email that to me by midnight on Friday. And even though my classroom students are taking the class online this week because of my PhD seminar that I'm in, I will be printing off those papers on Friday so I can begin grading those. So today we're going to continue on with the lecture for the Greek civilization, and we're going to start off with some recap, sometimes we usually do, is recap some of the things that we talked about last time, and then we're going to move into how were the Greek people, how were they ruled? Greece was a collection of city-states all over the place, and they had their own little systems within themselves. And we think of Athens, or we think of Sparta, or another a larger city-state you might be familiar with, but they each had their own little kind of ruler called an oligarch. And so how was it that they came together to be ruled? And so we're going to look at that. We will look at the Spartans today in a little bit of detail. It's pretty interesting how they lived. They're a very warrior-like society, very militaristic. So we'll be looking at them and how they had such a strong grip on their people and the people in the surrounding area because of their military. And then we're going to finish up our lecture today talking about the class system, because there were aristocrats who were very wealthy, and then there were slaves. So we're going to look at the class system today and how the ancient Greeks ruled their areas and ruled the people, and where the people fit in with what they did and who had authority over who. So we're going to be looking at that here today. So hang on, we're going to move now into our PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to be looking at ancient Greece. This is session number 2. Just a recap from last video PowerPoint. I just wanted to share quickly in regards to the polis again. If you remember what the polis was, it was the most important institution in the city-state. So pay attention to that. Make sure you know that. Most important institution in the city-state. By 800 BC, it functioned as the principal centers within Greece. If you remember, we talked about the oligarchies and the oligarchs who were the rulers. So basically, it was kind of like the first monarchies began. An oligarch is like a little king. So the first monarchies, these were ambitious leaders. They were not necessarily oppressive. In fact, many of the oligarchs were quite popular. Okay, so we talked about the oligarchies, and these are people groups that are controlled by an oligarch. It's a form of power structure in which power rests with the nobility over a smaller number of people within a larger group of people. So kind of like little kings within the same group of, like the same nationality. So they control their own little group of people within a larger group of people who are the same like nationality. Okay, so we're going to move on today now in regards to Sparta. I'm sure you've heard of that, those people, the Spartans. Okay, Sparta was a city. It was a city-state. It was situated on the fertile plain of Peloponnesus. And I just threw a lot of stuff up there on the screen. We'll just run down through it quickly. As the population expanded, they gained more control over their neighbors outside of the actual city or the city-state area, and they began to take control of the people around them, their neighbors. Basically, they took control of them, and they reduced them to what are called helots. And the helots are it's a status. It's a group of people kind of looked at as a status, and basically they became the slaves of the Spartan state. They were not bought and sold, but they were not free either. So they were taken control of, whether that be through expansion or through military, and they were basically tied to the land. They would basically serve in the agricultural areas. They could form families amongst themselves. They could establish families, but they could not leave the land that they were serving on. And their role in society was basically agricultural labor to feed the Spartans. So these are the Helots. And by the 6th century BC, the Helots outnumbered the Spartans 10-1. So there was a lot of Helots. They took control of a lot of people. Now the Spartans needed to control them to suppress rebellions, to keep people in check, the Helots in check. So they did this through strict military discipline to keep such a large number of slaves under control. So the society became very militaristic. And that's what we kind of think about with the Spartans. Maybe you saw a movie or something about the Spartans. And so they became very militaristic. And then that went over into the society at large. It became a stern society. It was a very strict society. Everything revolved around the military. Boys were removed from their families at the age of 7 and sent to military barracks for training. They would live there. They would train there. It was very rigorous, very physical training, physical activity. And notice, after 13 years of military training, so we go to school from kindergarten through 12th grade in the United States, and that's basically 13 years, 12 years, first grade to 12th grade, and then adding kindergarten. We go to school for 13 years in the United States. Well, they were in military training for 13 years, and then after they left the military training at the age of 20, they would then be placed in the regular army for active duty service. So this was a very militaristic society that the boys and then into the men were required to serve in the military. The girls would receive regular physical exercise training because it was believed that they would then have strong babies if they were physically fit and physically strong as girls. Between 18 and 20 years old, they would marry, but only be with their husbands for sexual relations. They would not live with their husbands. Their husbands were in the barracks. Their husbands were serving in the military. But then at the age of 30, so after 10 years of the man being in the active service, at the age of 30, the husbands would be released from the military barracks and then would live with their wives and their children. So you see, it was a very militaristic society. Everything was controlled. Not much home life until the age of 30. By the 4th century BC, they were established as a strong military. They were able to live a life of luxury within Sparta. Their institutions reflected the militaristic society, so their schools and the government and everything revolved around the militaristic society that they lived in. Very harsh society. And there's a picture of a battle, some drawing there. So you see, this here will be the Spartan. This is known as a Spartan helmet with this face mask. You may have seen a picture of that before. And they're fighting these poor guys over here that have nothing, a little shield and a little hat on. This guy's not doing too well right there. It's never good to be in the battle when you're laying on your back. Okay, so now Athens. Kind of looking like a comparison now, like Sparta and Athens. But Athens' life, it was not as militaristic. They did have a military, they did have that, but it was not as militaristic as Sparta. They developed more of a democracy to deal with social tensions. So the social tensions that were with the Sparta, they were just basically crushed by the military. But in Athens, it was more of a democracy to deal with social tensions. They sought to negotiate order instead of military suppression. They developed early democratic system Basically, the free adult males could hold office. Women and slaves could not. Maritime trade brought wealth to Athens and the surrounding area. And this was actually as early as 7th century BC. So don't think that, around the 4th century BC is when they started getting wealth. Actually, 7th century BC, the trade was developed and they were gaining wealth around Athens. As wealth grew, so did the aristocrats who held larger and larger land tracts. Aristocrats basically means wealthy. The wealthy people, they held larger and larger land tracts. Here's a picture of the Athens democracy in action. Some artwork there. It's pretty interesting to look at these different people within the artwork, because whenever you look at art, this definitely looks like something from the Renaissance. Whenever you look at artwork, everything is done in the artwork for a purpose. When I was going for my bachelor's degree, I almost minored in art history. Instead, I minored in anthropology. But I almost minored in art history, and everything that goes on in art, especially Renaissance art, it's there for a purpose. So you can go through this if you know about art history. You can see the different things that jump out of who's doing what and what certain things mean. Well, this guy down here, he doesn't look very happy. I'm not sure. If I was in a democratic situation here, I wouldn't want to be laying on the steps. I'm not sure what he's doing. The aristocrats began to control government and the smaller landowners. And they did this through debt. So they were in control of the government because they were wealthy. And then they maintained their wealth and actually gained more wealth because of the debts that a smaller landowner may have towards the aristocrat. And so if they couldn't pay the debt, the land was basically sold or taken, sold to the aristocrat, whose estate would now grow even larger. And so now you have the lower people not able to own land anymore because they were in debt, and now they are probably tied to the land if they have to pay off their debt through some kind of service. It just wasn't a very good situation for the lower people, lower class. And so what happened was civil wars ensued, and one took place in regards to the Attica is the name of the place, Attica. And this civil war actually ended through a mediation by a guy named Solon, Solon, and he brought some resolutions. And so you can kind of see within this mediation, you can see democracy in action. So the aristocrats in this resolution were able to keep all their land, so that's good for them. The small landowners' debts were canceled, so that's good for them. And then they were given representation within the government, so that's even better news for them. And what happened was in Athens, it came to where the citizens, if they were wealthy enough, then they could serve in office. That's supposed to say serve. Typo there, serve in office. And what happened was even commoners could influence office holders if they paid them, which could lead to, obviously, corruption. But this was a mediation by Solon that brought some democratic resolutions to stop a civil war. All right, students, we're good for that today. I hope you guys are enjoying the lecture here on Greece. And as we get into a little more detail there, make sure you're reviewing your notes. A lot of times these names and places and some of the details can start to overlap one another. So just run through those notes every once in a while, maybe once a day or once every other day, whatever, and just refresh your memory on your notes. It's easy to just take notes on the class and then put it away and not even pick it up until the next week, which, especially online, if you watched all 3 of these videos in one day, took some notes, and then don't do anything with them until the next week, you can forget what you learned. So maybe review the notes every other day, so it is refreshing your memory before you tackle the next week of videos. Other than that, we are going to see you in the next video. Take care.